Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Hello and welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I am excited to bring this song to you. I've got the chai tea heated in the mug, ready to go for this episode. And not only that, but the potentiometer is in just the right slot for the volume, and we are ready to take off. But first, there is a little credit to this song that we're going to cover today. It's called 7 Days, and it is off the Different World album. And there is a keyboard programming credit to Steve Piggott. So we'll have to listen and see if there's anything we can pick out that he might have done. Very interesting when you have a keyboard player. Sometimes you do need to bring people in because either there isn't time to do something yourself because you have too many other tasks, and so you need to delegate, or maybe there's something special that they had an idea that Steve could do that just didn't fit with what they were doing. And there's so many possibilities of why you would bring in an external person to work on a song or an album that isn't a member of the band. So it'll be interesting to see if we can find something that matches that. But I say let's just get right into the song. Here it is. It's called 7 Days by Uriah Heep. Wow, a lot to unpack right off the bat. So it's interesting to me, starting with the guitar that gives us the intro along with the drums. The guitar actually sounds kind of thin by itself. I'm used to hearing there being like a rich full tone coming from Mick, a little bit of more bottom end on the EQ to kind of thicken things up. But once the organ is added, once Phil joins in, then all of a sudden the guitar sounds like rich and full and exactly what I would expect it would be. So that could be something that was done on the mix very easily with an EQ. That could have been very, planned for whatever reason. But it does sound good. I like the just the straightforward of it. The guitar does sound very clean. Love the way it sounds with the drums, though. And for those of you who aren't that familiar with drums, most of you probably would know, but basically Lee is hitting a floor tom along with the snare. It's very precise, but that's what's giving you that boom sound along with the snare. And then the kick is actually really nice and punchy when it stands on its own, when you can really hear it without the rest of the band. And so, of course, once the band joins in, it changes the sound of the drum. You don't hear it as much. It's not as pronounced, not pushing you in the chest quite like it is in the beginning. But once the rest of the band comes in, it sounds great. I love the way the keyboard blends. Trevor's playing some really nice stuff on bass, and he's kind of coming back into that typical Uriah Heep wandering bass line that just sounds really good. It's got a great groove to what he's playing right here, and it's a great setup for a song. So now that Bernie's jumping in, let's see what happens next. Well, I have to say, this is some great rock and roll right here. I mean, what Trevor's playing throughout this on bass is just fantastic. He's really creating that old Uriah Heep atmosphere, where the bass was very active. And of course, the drums are just riding along right with him. Very solid, very solid. Not flashy, which this song doesn't really need. There may be a place for it later, but right now he just needs to be that solid foundation that keeps everyone grounded. Because when you do that kind of wandering stuff, sometimes, if there's nothing to guide you, you can get a little too fast. You can kind of lose the tempo of the song. So it's really important that Lee's providing that right there for Trevor. And then, of course, the guitars and the keyboards, the way that they're interacting each other sounds fantastic. I love the little fill-ins that we're getting from Phil, a Phil from Phil. And just with the organ there, the just tenseness of the chord sounds fantastic. And the guitars, they're just well balanced. This song's got a really good mix to it too, which I really like. So really the only thing from a mix standpoint that I wish was a little bit different would be that the vocals would be just a little bit louder. Again, not a whole lot, maybe a little more than a hair, just to make them a little bit more upfront and clear. Also could work with a little bit more treble in the EQ, just a little, not a lot, but just something to make the vocals stand out a little ahead of the song, because it does kind of blend in more like an instrument than it does somebody who's telling the story and should be the focal point. But Bernie sounds great, very nice and strong in this song. And honestly, that's something that I've said pretty much on every song, I think, throughout this album, is that the vocals are just a touch too quiet. But other than that, it sounds good. Everything's very clear in the mix. There's a good separation where all the instruments are coming through. And that's something I think over the last few albums we've really missed. And it's really nice to hear that full, almost 3D presence back. I love the way that ride cymbal is cutting through. Then again, for those of you who aren't drummers or musicians, the ride cymbal, instead of the hi-hat, is the one that's giving us that ping. It's like kind of a bell sound, but not like a bright bell or anything like that. Just kind of that ping that we're hearing in the rhythm. But I really like when Lee goes to that. It's not very often, so it feels like it's a very special thing when he makes that decision. And I think that ride just sounds great, especially with this song. It's mixed it very well in, blends very nicely. But, it seems like on this album, too, that he's gotten into a pattern sort of throwing an extra snare in the chorus. And this one actually is fairly subtle, but it works. And it's just a nice little change up. But I can't say he's done it on every song, but it seems like there's been a couple already. So it's an interesting style. He does sound quite different on the last couple albums than he has on previous albums. And, it could be like Ian Pace, when they came back with Perfect Strangers, he wasn't very flashy. He really laid back and worked the transitions very well, but he wasn't throwing a lot of stuff in during the songs on those first couple albums as much. And he said it was because the music of the time was different. He said, you can't really do things the way we did in the 70s. It's different and you have to play differently. And so that might be a little bit of what we're hearing out of Lee too, is that he's adjusting with the times. And I can't say I necessarily agree with that. I think that the music of the band defines who they are in that time. So let's say that Uriah Heep had chosen to go back to the style of an album like Look at Yourself, which was very progressive, lots of changes, lots of vocal harmonies and that kind of thing. I think it would have been accepted by Uriah Heep fans. Now, whether they would have been understood by people who were new to the band or didn't really know their older stuff, that's a different story. So it's always interesting how bands change with the times. And I think Uriah Heep has been one that's really adapted well. But at the same point, I think that if they would have stayed with that style, I think they would have been okay with their fans, but would they have gained new fans along the way? It's such a tough thing, but I think if you just write naturally, and granted too, we're also talking a lot of different members in the bands during these times too. It's not the same lineup from the first lineup or the second lineup of the band. It's a whole different set of people. So except for Mick and Lee shortly after, like what he joined on Demons and Wizards, I think. So you have to look at it that way too. It's the different influences of different people and the time and the way things were mixed and the way things were recorded. I mean, there's so many factors, but it's interesting how like a band like the Rolling Stones, they don't seem like they've ever changed. It just seems like they've done what they do, and that's it. And then you have a lot of other bands that, they get experimental during different times, especially when new toys come out. Like when, new synthesizers came out, bands tend to change their sound a little bit. If they have obviously if they have a keyboard player, but it's so fascinating to watch how different bands evolve and do different things during the different periods of music. Uriah Heep definitely became more straightforward and more guitar-oriented come Abominog, where the guitar became the primary instrument on pretty much every song. And there's there's obviously some exceptions to that, but they really changed their sound at that point, and they've really stayed in that direction. I mean, ever since Abominog, that's what we've heard. But it's also made the music, they've made the music a lot more straightforward too. So it's interesting to hear these little things from Lee and from Trevor, almost like saying, we're still the Uriah Heep that our fans knew, but we're also doing this kind of music now as well. And I love when a band can adapt and still put out great music and still be interesting to listen to like these guys are. Oh man, the sound on that solo is great, isn't it? Normally I would say that it would be good to add a little more of that bottom end into the guitar for the solo, but I think the way that they put the keyboard in with the guitar sounded really good. I don't think we were missing anything there without that extra low end. I think it sounded great. And of course, I mean, the performance is fantastic, but that was interesting. I would, as an engineer, would not have chosen to go that way, but I think it works. Also, I was thinking, too, on the programming that Steve Piggott did, I think it's possible, too, that it wasn't necessarily, like a sequence programming. It could have been tone programming, like shaping a sound for the song. It could have been that Phil said, I'm just not getting the sound that I want. Steve, why don't you tweak it and see what you can do with it? Maybe you can get me there. I mean, it could be anything. There's nothing specific that I've seen on why he got involved. But keep those things in mind because, too, when the bands are recording, even when they're doing writing sessions, they get very busy. They don't necessarily have time to do all the things that they would like to do. And it never hurts to bring in somebody else who can take some of those tasks away so you can maybe focus on the writing. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's whatever it takes to get the project done and to get it sounding the best it can be is the most important thing overall. I'm pretty sure that somewhere in the background of all of this, I'm hearing at least one tambourine track and either a second tambourine or maybe a shaker. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'm hearing it a little bit more in my left ear than my right. But, you can use those and blend them in very nicely where it's not like, oh, they're using a tambourine. You might not really notice it. I mean, I'm specifically listening for sounds, trying to dissect and focus on different things. So I'm kind of going out of my way. And if you're not doing that, you might not even notice it was there. But those kinds of things do really help thicken up songs. And you can do it where they're blended so gently that you don't hear them specifically, but they have a presence more than, something that's upfront that you would notice. It's almost like some of these layered tracks that Mick does, or sometimes the blended pads that we hear on the keyboards. A lot of times those are just there to add presence and not necessarily be heard as like a standout instrument. And I think it really sounds good. I think this song just sounds really full from my left ear to my right. I think it's got a really nice blend. Like I said, other than just a little more vocals, it sounds fantastic. And so it's not surprising that they would use things like that to help thicken up that sound and keep the rhythm going on almost more of a subconscious level. Weird, unexpected, but super cool. I love that. It just out of the blue, they're going to stop and you think they're going to do one of those things where, you're just going to have an a cappella vocal and drums or maybe something like that. But no, it was just a brief drop out of the music and then it came back in with a vengeance. It sounded like there was a very low voice. It didn't sound like a bass, just coming in with I can't. And it sounded like it dropped off there. But that was nice. A very quick, unexpected. Probably had to practice that a few times to get that down, I would imagine, because it's quite different. But it sounded really cool. And, even as straightforward as the band has been over the last couple of albums, there's still always that chance with Uriah Heep that they're just going to throw something in there that's kind of random and seems out of place and just throws you off, but it's the coolest thing. And I love that about these guys. And that's a nice treat. We get the harmonica back to take us down out of the song as it fades into oblivion. And, I don't know who played the harmonica on that. It's not uncommon that it's the singer that would do it, but I don't have a credit for it, so I'm not sure whether Bernie plays harmonica or not. Either way, it was really cool. That was a nice addition to the song, I have to say. Now, I want to point out one more thing for non-drummers. There is a really big difference between playing on the hi-hat and playing on the ride cymbal. The biggest difference, besides the sound, obviously, and the way that you would play them, is that when you're playing on the hi-hat, your arms are typically crossed. So let's say that you're a right-handed drummer, and your right hand is playing on the hi-hat, which is to your left, and then the snare hand is your left hand, and that's sort of in the middle between your legs. So your left or your right arm has to cross over your left to hit the hi-hat. So that limits what you can do with your left hand. It pretty much sticks to the snare because otherwise you'd have to cross over your right hand to hit anything else. So it can be done, but it's a little more awkward. Now, when you switch to the ride, your arms are parallel, right? So you're using the ride with your right hand, which is off to your right side, and your left hand is still hitting that drum between your legs. So now nothing is crossed over. You're free to move your left hand wherever you like. And it's very simple and a lot of fun, actually, to throw in some tom hits in between the snares. So as we heard Lee doing, especially in that last part of the repeating chorus there, we heard him do like a, snare tom, back to snare, a couple of double hits, which you can easily move your right hand back to a tom from the ride. Because again, you're not crossing over anything. And it makes you a little more freed up to experiment and play around a little bit and be creative. So it's nice that he took advantage of that. We don't get to hear him do it a lot. So it was really, I think, a nice addition to the song. I think it fit in really well to add that little shake up to the groove there. But what a great song. I mean, fantastic keyboards and guitars just blending together really nice. Incredible groove from the bass. Really solid drumming with some nice surprises in there. Great singing. Just another powerful rock and roll delivery from Bernie. And just a good feel to the song. You can feel the excitement in the lyrics. You can feel the energy in the music, and a great guitar solo with some nice keyboard touches in there. Just, I have to say, this is definitely one of their best songs from this era, if not overall. It just is a feel good song. And I can't say enough good things about it, but I'll stop. If you want more, just hit rewind. There it is. Another episode, guys. Fantastic one, I have to say. Really good song. I hope that you enjoyed it, especially if this is a new song for you as it was for me. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, because I think there's a lot of great stuff in here. Very enjoyable one. This would be another great song to start your day with, wouldn't it? Like, you wake up, you're kind of groggy, you roll over and you hit your, start on your iPod or your phone, music player on your phone or whatever it is you're using to listen to. I probably sound very oddly old saying iPod, I would imagine, because I don't know how many people use iPods anymore. I do. But anyway, it's a killer song. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you will join us for our next episode of the podcast. We'll see you in the next one, guys. Have a great day. Cheers. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!